On the day we were supposed to get married, my fiancé ran away. In a moment of defiant clarity, I turned around and married his father instead. My thinking was simple. If I couldn't be his wife, then I would become his mother. When Leo eventually returned and saw me, still in his family home, he assumed I was just being stubborn, refusing to accept defeat. He pulled a single pure white flower from behind his back, a flimsy prop in his personal drama, and bluntly told me this flower represented his true love. He warned me not to hold on to any fantasies about us. I just smiled. Then, I gently took the hand of the handsome older man standing beside me. "Dearest stepson," I said, my voice sweet as honey, "why don't you try calling me Mom? I'd love to hear it. My name is Clara, and I am the sole heiress to the Beaumont Corporation." Today was supposed to be my wedding day to Leo Sterling, the heir to the Sterling Group. But the man who should have been waiting for me at the altar was gone. "You mean Leo just left?" My voice was dangerously calm. "That seems to be the case, miss," the maid stammered, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the tray she was carrying. My parents were, to put it mildly, furious. The Beaumont and Sterling families had spent months meticulously planning this wedding. Invitations had been dispatched to every influential family in the city, and the media had been covering the lead-up with breathless excitement. If Leo had any reservations, he'd had countless opportunities to voice them. To disappear on the wedding day itself was a calculated insult, a resounding slap in the face to my entire family. After offering what comfort they could, my parents rushed off to strategize with the Sterling representatives, trying to salvage the situation. I retreated to a quiet corner of the bridal suite, my mind racing, trying to figure out how to navigate the impending disaster of the reception banquet. A stir at the doorway drew my attention. I looked up and saw a man in an impeccably tailored black suit. He had a commanding presence and a face so handsome it seemed almost unfair. This was Arthur Sterling, the current head of the Sterling family and, legally speaking, Leo's father. Though he was 35, he could have easily passed for a man in his late 20s. He was notoriously private, rarely making public appearances. I could count on one hand the number of times I'd actually seen him in person. The moment he appeared, the scattered guests at the pre-reception flocked towards him, each one hoping for a moment of his attention. As Arthur politely but firmly deflected their advances and began walking toward me, a wild, audacious idea took root in my mind. I composed my features into a polite, slightly wounded smile. "Mr. Sterling," I began, my voice laced with a delicate tremor of grievance, "I am so terribly sorry for the embarrassment this has caused you and your family." "The fault is ours, Clara," he said, his voice a deep, steady baritone. "I've already dispatched people to find Leo. Once he is located, his punishment will be yours to decide. I will address our guests, explain that the wedding is merely postponed, and the Sterling family will bear full responsibility for all associated costs." It was a perfect diplomatic solution, but it wasn't the one I wanted. "That's a very reasonable plan," I said, looking up at him. "But I might have a better one." A flicker of curiosity entered his dark eyes. "Mr. Sterling, my engagement was to the Sterling family, established when I was just a child. The contract stipulates that I marry the heir, but it doesn't explicitly name Leo, does it?" The situation shifted so rapidly that even the unflappable Arthur Sterling was taken aback for a second. When he grasped my meaning, his gaze sharpened, becoming more intense. "No," he said slowly. "It doesn't. Who, then, did you have in mind?" I let a sweet, dazzling smile spread across my face and, without a single shred of hesitation, extended my hand toward him. "Would you be willing to be my groom?" The story of Arthur Sterling was well known in our circles. He was not Leo's biological father. Rumor had it that an accident in his youth had left him unable to have children, which was why he had remained a bachelor for so long. At 25, he adopted Leo, the son of a distant relative, to secure the family line. To me, the fact that he might be infertile was a non-issue. With modern medicine, it was likely treatable. And if it wasn't, a life without children didn't seem like such a terrible fate. Arthur looked from my outstretched hand to the bright, determined smile on my face. He raised a single, perfect eyebrow. Are you certain, Clara? Absolutely, I replied instantly. In my mind, the comparison was simple. Arthur was 10 times the man my runaway fiancé was. He was more handsome, more powerful, and possessed an aura of quiet confidence that Leo could only dream of. Even if the marriage was purely for show, waking up next to that face every day would be a significant upgrade. It was certainly better than the alternative, being publicly jilted by a coward like Leo. He studied my face for a long moment, then his large, warm hand closed around mine. The strength and firmness of his grip sent an unexpected shiver through me, and just like that, the main event had a new leading man. We didn't even need to change. My elegant white wedding gown paired perfectly with Arthur's bespoke black suit. We looked every bit the intended bride and groom. The guests who had assembled for the banquet were sharp people. Leo's sudden vanishing act was the worst-kept secret in the room. The reporters, smelling a story far juicier than a simple society wedding, had their cameras poised, ready to document the fallout between two of the city's most powerful families. When they saw me walk onto the stage, hand in hand with Arthur Sterling, a collective gasp rippled through the hall. They were stunned by the sheer audacity of it. The master of ceremonies, holding a hastily revised script, introduced the new bride and groom with admirable professionalism. And now, the bride and groom will exchange rings. Arthur produced a simple, elegant platinum band and slid it onto my finger. It was a perfect fit. I took the ring intended for Leo, and when I tried to place it on Arthur's finger, it was obviously too small. I shot him an apologetic look. There hadn't been time to resize it. He simply smiled, and with a little effort, we managed to get it on, though it was snug. After the rings, it was time for the kiss. A wave of nervousness washed over me. Arthur's public image was one of reserved, almost ascetic self-control. He was a man who attended few social events and was never seen with a female companion. As I started to second-guess my impulsive decision, I felt a soft, firm pressure on my lips. My eyes flew open in surprise. Arthur's flawless face was inches from mine. Sensing my shock, he gently cupped the back of my head, his thumb stroking my neck as he deepened the kiss. I slowly closed my eyes, the sound of thunderous applause from our guests filling the room. My parents were, of course, completely unaware of my plan, but they were seasoned socialites. They smiled, accepted the congratulations of those around them, and betrayed nothing of their shock. During the toast, my mother pulled me aside into a private room where my father was waiting. "Clara, what on earth is going on?" she demanded as soon as the door was closed. "How did you end up marrying Arthur?" I hesitated, unsure how to explain the whirlwind of impulse and strategy that had led me here. "Because he's handsome," I said, knowing it was a flimsy excuse. My mother paused, picturing Arthur's face, and had to concede the point. "But he's more than 10 years older than you. He was practically a teenager when you were born." "So what? They say older men know how to take care of a woman," I deflected. "But the rumors, Clara, they say he's unable to—" My mother's voice trailed off, her concern palpable. I was trying to think of a reassuring response when a knock came at the door. My mom opened it to find Arthur standing there. My parents' expressions immediately smoothed into polite smiles, any trace of their earlier interrogation vanishing. "Mr. Sterling," my father said, "is there something we can do for you?" "I wanted to have a word with you both," Arthur said calmly. I don't know what he said, but in the short time they spoke, their opposition to our union completely evaporated. By the end of the conversation, they were his biggest supporters. "Arthur is a good man," my father acknowledged later. "Capable, resourceful. He's older, yes, but a man like that can protect you, our precious daughter. Someone like Leo, who would run away at the last minute, was never worthy of you." After the wedding, I moved into the Sterling mansion. It was Arthur's private residence, and it was my first time seeing it. The interior was a study in sophisticated minimalism, all clean lines and a palette of black, white, and gray. After the chaos of the day, I was exhausted and smelled faintly of champagne and stress. Arthur went to shower first, and I collapsed onto the plush sofa to gather my thoughts. The sound of running water filled the quiet room. Through the frosted glass of the ensuite bathroom, I could just make out the silhouette of the man inside. A faint blush crept up my neck, and I quickly averted my eyes. A short while later, the water stopped, and my gaze drifted back to the door just as Arthur emerged. He was wearing a simple white bathrobe, tied loosely at the waist. The collar was open, revealing a broad, muscular chest and the faint definition of his abs. My jaw went slack. I had never imagined that the stoic, business-minded man would have such a physique. As I stared, a ghost of a smile touched the corners of his mouth. "Clara, why don't you go get cleaned up?" His voice was a low, magnetic rumble that vibrated through the room. Realizing I'd been gawking, I scrambled off the couch and retreated into the bathroom, my face burning. I undressed and stood under the hot spray, letting the water wash over me, but Arthur's voice still echoed in my ears. After my shower, I realized with a jolt that I'd forgotten to bring a change of clothes. With no other choice, I cracked the bathroom door open, just enough to peek out. "Arthur," I called out softly, "I forgot my clothes. Could you hand me my bag from the couch?" There was a moment of silence, and I wondered if he'd left the room. Just as I was about to call out again, his voice came, laced with a hint of amusement. "Of course." I heard his footsteps, the rustle of the bag, and then he was at the door. "Here you are." He passed the bag to me as I cautiously extended my arm through the gap. "Thank you," I murmured, starting to close the door. But as I did, my eyes met his. His gaze was deep and intense, and it flickered down to the delicate lingerie I was holding in my hand. My face exploded in a fresh wave of heat. After dawdling in the bathroom for as long as I could, I finally took a deep breath and stepped out. Arthur was already in a pair of gray pajama pants, sitting on the edge of the bed and reading through a document. When he saw me, he set the papers aside. I was relieved to see he wasn't looking at me with a teasing glint in his eye. Coincidentally, I had something important to discuss with him. "What are your plans for Leo?" I asked. As if he'd been expecting the question, he picked up the file he'd just been reading and handed it to me. "Take a look." I walked over and took the document. Inside was a detailed report of Leo's affair with a girl named Chloe. It was a classic, cliché story. A wealthy young man and a seemingly innocent girl caught in a whirlwind romance. There was even a photo of Chloe looking the very picture of purity. According to the report, they'd had a tumultuous, on-again, off-again relationship for months, completely without my knowledge. The night before our wedding, Chloe had discovered he was getting married, and her tearful phone call sent Leo into a spiral of guilt, prompting him to abandon his bride and elope with his true love. If I hadn't been the bride in question, I might have found it romantic. Unfortunately, I was the unlucky one. "Leo has already taken his girlfriend on a trip abroad," Arthur said calmly. "I've dispatched my people to bring him back. If you wish, we can still annul our marriage. We only had the ceremony. We haven't registered yet." He must have sensed my anger and thought I was having second thoughts, but regret was the furthest thing from my mind. "Why would I regret it?" I said, tossing the file onto the bed. "I threw away a piece of trash and found a priceless treasure. This is the luckiest day of my life. We're getting married for real. Let's go to the registrar's office tomorrow." Seeing the sincerity in my eyes, Arthur's expression grew serious. "You said before that I could handle Leo as I saw fit, correct?" A mischievous smile played on my lips. "Absolutely." "Very well," I said, my mind already spinning with possibilities. "I want you to freeze all his credit cards. Cut off every line of credit. Let's see how Mr. Romantic enjoys his getaway with his innocent little flower when he's completely broke." Arthur saw the wickedness in my smile, and instead of dissuading me, added a suggestion of his own. "Starting today, I will also seize all assets currently held in his name. What do you think of that?" His sudden and total support caught me off guard, and I felt a blush creep up my cheeks. "I think that's a wonderful idea," I said, my voice steady and filled with satisfaction. Now that the scumbag was being dealt with, it was time for the next matter of business. "Well," Arthur suggested, looking genuinely tired, "let's get some rest." He reached over and turned off the lights, plunging the room into darkness. I lay on my side of the bed, stiff as a board, hardly daring to breathe. I wasn't exactly well versed in marital customs. What was supposed to happen now? As I debated whether I should make a move, Arthur's voice cut through the darkness, calm and reassuring. "I won't touch you until you're ready, Clara." A sigh of relief escaped my lips. I closed my eyes, but a stray thought wandered through my mind. With a woman like me by his side, could he really resist? Was it true, what the rumors said? Was it really impossible for him? I must have mumbled the thought aloud because I felt the bed shift. Long, slender fingers came to rest on my waist, and I felt warm breath tickle my ear. "Why don't you find out for yourself?" he whispered, his voice low and teasing. I learned a valuable lesson that night. You should never provoke a man who has practiced abstinence for many years. The consequences are entirely your own to bear. The next day, I woke up late. The space beside me in the bed was cool and empty. Arthur was already gone. The CEO, I mused, is a very busy man. My stomach rumbled, and I went downstairs in search of food. To my surprise, Arthur was sitting at the dining table, casually flipping through a magazine. "Did you rest well?" he asked, his eyes lifting to meet mine. He wasn't in a suit today, but a simple white shirt, the top buttons undone, revealing faint red marks on his collarbone. Thinking about the previous night, my face grew hot again. "I rested very well," I retorted. At this, Arthur's smile widened. "It seems you were quite satisfied then. That puts my mind at ease." Who was praising him? This man had no shame. I sat down at the table feeling flustered. He merely smiled indulgently and went to the kitchen, returning with a tray of warm food. "I figured you wouldn't want anything too greasy right after waking up," he said. The breakfast was simple: steamed buns, some side dishes, and a bowl of congee. I was starving and dug in eagerly. The first bite of a steamed bun made my eyes light up. "This is delicious. Who made it?" I asked. Arthur just smiled without answering. A thought occurred to me. "Did you make this yourself?" He gave a slight nod. "As long as it suits your taste." I wanted to say something sarcastic, but the food was genuinely incredible. A person has to be true to their conscience. Seeing me eat so happily, Arthur looked pleased. It seemed his private cooking lessons hadn't gone to waste. After a leisurely meal, I went upstairs to change. Our decision to marry had been so abrupt that I hadn't brought any of my things. There wasn't a single item of women's clothing in the entire villa. Arthur saw my predicament, frowned slightly, and made a quick phone call. By the time I came back down, ready to head to my parents' house to pick up some clothes, he stopped me. "Let's go," he said. He was also dressed for the day in a white shirt and light-colored jeans, looking more like a university student than a corporate titan. But as my eyes fell on his collar, I saw the faint red marks were still visible. "Are you really going out looking like that?" I asked. "Why not?" He looked puzzled. Before he could react, I stepped forward and carefully buttoned his top button, adjusting his collar to hide the evidence of our mourning. Then I took his arm and we headed out the door. I heard him chuckle softly as his large hand enveloped mine. With the release of our official wedding photos, Arthur and I were legally and publicly husband and wife. It still felt a bit surreal, but looking at the pictures of the handsome groom and the beautiful bride, I couldn't help but think we made a perfect couple. I had excellent taste. Meanwhile, Leo was finding his romantic getaway with Chloe to be less than ideal. Just as I'd hoped, all his cards were frozen. He, the young master of a conglomerate who never carried cash, was suddenly penniless abroad. Luckily for him, Chloe, who had quit her job after starting her relationship with him, still had some personal savings. If it weren't for her, he might not have been able to afford a plane ticket home. "Don't worry, Leo," she cooed, gently comforting him. "Something must have just happened with the bank." "Chloe, thank you," he said, overwhelmed with gratitude as she handed him the tickets she'd purchased. Still, a seed of suspicion was planted. His cards had no spending limit. For them to be frozen, someone powerful had to have given the order. Clara must have done something. He fumed internally. He decided it was time to go home, formalize his relationship with Chloe, and finally give her the status she deserved. He imagined them getting married, and then he would take over the Sterling Group from Arthur. No one would be able to control him then. Lost in his fantasy of a happy, free future, he boarded the flight home. After a 7-hour journey, they arrived back in the city. It was 8 in the morning. Knowing Arthur rarely stayed at the main family estate, Leo headed directly for Arthur's private villa. At that exact moment, I was lounging on the couch watching television, lazily waiting for Arthur to finish making breakfast. For the past few days, we had spent nearly all our time together. Arthur had even given the villa staff a short holiday, so he was in charge of all the meals. I couldn't cook to save my life, and fortunately, he didn't seem to mind. A mechanical voice sounded from the intercom. "Master, there is a visitor at the gate." I slipped on my slippers and padded over to the security monitor. When I saw the travel-worn figures of Leo and Chloe on the screen, I couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. That was fast. "Your eldest son has returned," I announced, walking into the kitchen. I leaned against Arthur's back as he expertly fried a perfect sunny-side-up egg. "It's up to you to handle it," he said without turning around. "I was waiting for you to say that." I left Leo and Chloe standing outside the gate while I leisurely went upstairs to change. Only then did I press the button to open it. The villa was on a large estate, and since the drivers were on vacation, they had to walk the considerable distance to the front door on foot. Hungry, thirsty, and tired from their flight, they trudged up the long driveway. "Wow, this place is huge," Chloe remarked, her eyes wide with a mixture of envy and greed. "When we get married, I'll buy you a place just as big," Leo declared proudly, puffed up by her awe. "It must be so expensive," she replied sweetly. "You don't have to. As long as I'm with you, I'm happy anywhere." Her words were the perfect balm for his ego. "It's nothing," he boasted. "In the future, I'll buy you several villas, one for every season." As they finally reached the front door, however, a wave of nervousness washed over Leo. He had never paid much attention to Arthur, his adoptive father, but as he'd gotten older, he'd witnessed Arthur's ruthless efficiency in dealing with disobedience and had learned to be cautious. Still, he reasoned, Arthur rarely interfered in his personal life. He took a deep breath, puffed out his chest, and pushed open the front door. "Dad!" he called out. The person who greeted him was not Arthur, it was me. I flashed him a gentle, welcoming smile. "Hello there." Leo instinctively took a step back. "Clara, what are you doing here?" he stammered. Chloe, who was right behind him, stumbled and let out a small cry of pain. "Are you okay?" Leo asked, instantly turning to her, his voice full of concern. "I'm fine, as long as you're here," she said bravely. After making sure she was all right, he turned his glare back to me. "I can't believe how malicious you are," he accused. "What did you do to deserve this?" "Don't blame me for your clumsiness," I said calmly. I was standing perfectly still. He realized his accusation was baseless and changed his line of attack. "You're shameless. Our wedding was called off. Why are you still here? I don't love you. This is my girlfriend, Chloe. We're getting married soon." I was genuinely taken aback by his sheer cluelessness. "What gave you that impression?" I asked. The boy clearly hadn't bothered to read a single news report from his own wedding day. "I know you and Leo were engaged," Chloe chimed in, her eyes welling up with tears. "But he and I are truly in love. Please, just let us be happy together." She put on such a dramatic, heartbreaking performance that it stirred Leo's protective instincts. "Clara, you've gone too far," he shouted at me. I sighed, trying to keep my patience. Was he delusional? His tone softened slightly. "Look, Clara, just find someone else. We have no future. Apologize to Chloe, and maybe we can still be friends." "Friends with you? I'd rather not. Stupidity might be contagious," I retorted, my irritation growing. Just as I was about to deliver another verbal blow, a deep, magnetic voice cut through the tension. "What's going on?" We all turned. Arthur had entered the room. He was dressed in a simple black shirt that somehow made him look even more devastatingly handsome. He placed a bowl on the dining table, his presence immediately commanding the room. Chloe froze, her eyes widening. Leo, eager to have an ally, immediately spoke up. "Arthur, what is she doing here?" Arthur ignored him completely, waving me over instead. "Clara, come eat." Leo, thinking the invitation was for them, brightened. "Dad, you even made breakfast for us," he said, moved. He started to pull Chloe toward the table, but Arthur stopped them with a look. "No, just for Clara." Leo's face fell. Arthur, ever composed, extended his hand to me with a small smile. "My dear, come here." I walked over, took his hand, and turned to face the dumbfounded couple. I gave them my most radiant smile before turning back to Arthur. "Eldest son, I said, my voice dripping with mock sweetness as I addressed Leo. Say hello to your new mom. The shock was absolute. They stood frozen, their mouths hanging open. Arthur, completely unfazed, sat down at the table, still holding my hand. Let's eat before the food gets cold, he said, ignoring them entirely. It took a full 2 minutes for Leo to process what had happened. What? When did this happen? How is this possible? He finally exclaimed, his earlier arrogance replaced by stunned disbelief. He shot me a venomous look. Dad, how could you marry her? She must have planned this. It's intentional. Besides, you're more than 10 years older than her. I let his frantic accusations hang in the air for a moment before I responded. I admit choosing Arthur was partly an act of revenge, I confessed. But mostly, it's because I'm a Beaumont, and I will not allow my family's name to be publicly disgraced. We don't marry for love, Leo. We marry for advantage. And frankly, Arthur is superior to you in every conceivable way. Looks, physique, intelligence, you name it. But the most important thing is, he dotes on me. To prove my point, I leaned over and planted a kiss on Arthur's cheek. Using a marriage for revenge? You really think you're worthy of that level of effort? I teased. I turned back to him playfully. Quick, eldest son, call me mom, or I'll make your father have another son to replace you. Leo's face was a mask of fury. Dad, aren't you going to do something about her? He demanded. Arthur finally looked up from his meal, an affectionate expression on his face. He reached over and ruffled my hair. How could I possibly control her? He said fondly. Besides, Clara is my wife now. You should call her mom. Seeing that he had no support, Leo's anger deflated into humiliation. He turned to leave, but Chloe grabbed his hand, her own face a picture of grievance. Fine, Leo muttered through gritted teeth. For a better future with Chloe, Mom. I couldn't hold it in any longer. I burst out laughing, my joy unconcealed. Good boy, eldest son, I crowed, which only made his face darken further. Ignoring his discomfort, I reached into my pocket. I even prepared a little gift for you. I held out a traditional red envelope. He didn't want to take it, but Arthur's calm voice cut in. Take it. Grinding his teeth, Leo snatched the envelope from my hand. Thank you, Mom, he spat. You're most welcome, I chirped, feeling utterly pleased with myself. Now it was time to address the other half of the problem. So, this is my future daughter-in-law, I mused, looking Chloe up and down. She was pretty, with fair skin and big, watery eyes, but she had a grasping, greedy look that she couldn't quite hide. Only a fool like Leo would fall for her innocent act. Hello, I'm Chloe. She hesitated, unable to bring herself to call me Mom. What's this all about? Arthur asked, wiping his mouth with a napkin, his tone shifting from domestic to business. The mention of business immediately snapped Leo's attention back. Dad, why are my cards frozen? Why are my car and the house under my name inaccessible? Arthur's demeanor instantly became stern. You called off the wedding at the last minute. Do you have any idea the kind of damage that did to the Beaumont and Sterling reputations? Can you bear those consequences? Leo was terrified. I don't like her. What's wrong with wanting to be with the person I love? He said defiantly. I smirked. It's not that simple, Leo. If you didn't want to marry me, you should have spoken up months ago. To run away on the wedding day itself was a calculated insult. Marrying me, the only daughter of the Beaumont family, would have secured your position as the Sterling heir. Without that alliance, there are plenty of other capable relatives who would be happy to take your place. What exactly makes you worthy? After I finished, Arthur turned to Leo. Do you understand? Leo stumbled over his words, unable to form a defense. He had grown up with everything handed to him and had never learned to consider the consequences of his actions. I know I was wrong, he mumbled. It won't happen again. Do you even have a future to worry about? Arthur's question was ice cold. Do you still want to be with her? At this, Leo's defiance returned. Yes, Dad, I love Chloe. I want to marry her. Fine, Arthur said, his voice calm and final. But if you choose her, you must give up your position as the heir to the Sterling family. Everything I have given you will be taken back. I will not support a useless person. The Sterling heir cannot marry an ordinary woman, not unless he has the capability to stand on his own. And you, Leo, do not. Leo's face twisted in disbelief. Dad, I just wanted to marry the woman I love. Why is the price so high? His decision stunned Chloe. This was not part of her plan. She had seduced Leo to marry into a life of luxury, not poverty. But before she could persuade him to reconsider, Leo grabbed her hand tightly. All right, he said to Arthur. I agree. From now on, I'm no longer your son. Can I be with Chloe now? Leo, you don't have to do this for me, Chloe cried, playing her part. I've made my decision, he said resolutely. Then he turned to her, his expression one of profound love. Don't worry, Chloe. I will give you a good life. I promise. I watched the drama unfold from the dining table, barely suppressing a smile. This was better than television. Well then, I won't keep you. You can go, Arthur said, dismissing them. Just like that, Leo, in a fit of arrogant pride, grabbed Chloe's hand and stormed out of the house. Once the door closed behind them, I finally let my laughter erupt. Oh, you're enjoying this far too much, Arthur said, coming over to rub my stomach, which ached from laughing. Of course I am. Did you see the look on his face? I grinned, grabbing his hand. Are you really going to kick him out for good, after all these years? He's not the only one who wants to call me Dad, Arthur said, gently rubbing my head. He lacks judgment and has no sense of responsibility. He can't carry the weight of this family. He deserves to learn a hard lesson. Arthur acted swiftly. Calls were made. Leo was officially cut off. His biological parents, who had arranged the adoption with Arthur, were furious with him and refused his calls for money. His so-called friends managed to loan him a little over $10,000, a paltry sum for a man used to spending that much on a single night out. In a fit of rage, he smashed his phone on the pavement. He found he couldn't get a management job and his pride wouldn't let him start at the bottom. The only work he could find that paid enough to live on was manual labor. He, Leo Sterling, started working as a bricklayer on a construction site, earning a few hundred yuan a day, less than what he used to spend on a single drink. Meanwhile, Chloe found a job as a waitress to support them. She still held out hope that this was all a test from the Sterling family, so she continued to play the part of the supportive, loving girlfriend. Leo, moved by her dedication, entrusted his meager earnings to her. He was humbled, exhausted, but also felt a strange sense of fulfillment. Coming home to Chloe's smile in their tiny apartment gave him a feeling he'd never known before. He thought this was what it felt like to have a real home. About a month later, after Arthur and I had returned from a blissful honeymoon on a sun-drenched beach, I was shocked to find Leo waiting outside our gate. He looked like a completely different person. His hair was messy, his clothes were dusty and worn, and he looked haggard. He was holding a carton of milk and a box of cheap pastries. I'm not here to ask for money, he said quickly, scratching his head sheepishly. He placed the items on the ground, not wanting to get them dirty. I wanted to thank you. He bowed deeply. Thank me for what? I asked, bewildered. Thank you and Arthur for kicking me out, he said with surprising sincerity. If you hadn't, I would never have experienced the happiness I feel now. His smile was genuine. He told me about his struggles, his new job, and the lessons he'd learned. And then he dropped the bombshell. I came to tell you that Chloe is pregnant. We're having a child, and I'm going to work hard to support my new family. I kept my expression neutral. As long as you're happy, Leo, Arthur and I wish you all the best. He left with a satisfied grin on his face, a man who thought he'd finally found true happiness, completely unaware that he was the star of a tragedy. I went back inside and told Arthur about Leo's visit. He was also a bit surprised, and after a moment, he got up to make a phone call. 2 hours later, a new report arrived. Take a look for yourself, Arthur said, handing me the file. It detailed Leo's life over the past few months, confirming everything he'd said. But the next section made my eyebrows shoot up. Chloe's pregnancy was real, but a discreetly obtained medical report confirmed the timeline. The child wasn't Leo's. It belonged to a delinquent ex-boyfriend she had been seeing behind Leo's back. She had hoped to pass the child off as his, but when she realized the Sterling family money was gone for good, she needed an exit strategy. You knew, didn't you? I asked Arthur, leaning against him. You've been having him followed. You seem to be enjoying the show, he grinned, so I made sure you wouldn't miss the finale. As Arthur predicted, the finale came swiftly. A month later, Chloe sold the small apartment they were renting, cleared out their joint bank account, which held all the money Leo had painstakingly earned, and disappeared with her ex-boyfriend, a small-time criminal named Marco. Leo came home from the construction site to find a new family moving into his apartment. He sat on the curb in despair, still clutching a small carton of strawberries he'd bought for Chloe. With only a few hundred yen to his name, he spent the night shivering on a park bench. The next morning, determined to report Chloe to the police, he started walking toward the station. But his vision went black, and he collapsed from exhaustion and malnutrition. When he woke up, he was in a hospital bed. I was sitting in a chair beside him. You fainted, I explained calmly. The police found my contact information in your wallet. After he drank some water, his voice returned. Wait, he called out as I stood to leave. He slid off the bed and knelt on the floor in front of me. It was my fault. I was blind. Please help me. Seeing the proud young master so thoroughly broken was a strange sight. All right, I said, surprising him with my quick agreement. I reached into my bag and pulled out the file. Here, this is why your little girlfriend left. He took the papers and read, his face crumbling as the harsh truth washed over him. He learned about Chloe's history, the abortion, the calculated deception, and the fact that the child he had been so proud of was never his. Tears streamed down his face as he knelt on the cold hospital floor and wept. The next day, a changed Leo walked into the Sterling Corporation headquarters. He didn't return as a vice president, but as an entry-level employee in the marketing department. You will earn your way back, Arthur had told him. Prove your worth. And to everyone's surprise, he did. He worked hard, his arrogance tempered by humility, and slowly began to climb the corporate ladder. Chloe's life, however, took a much darker turn. The money she stole didn't last long with Marco, who was a gambler and a cheat. 6 months into her pregnancy, she caught him in a hotel room with another woman. Enraged, she attacked them, forgetting her condition in her fury. In the ensuing struggle, she was pushed, fell hard, and went into premature labor. The baby, a boy, was stillborn. Due to complications from the fall and excessive bleeding, she suffered irreparable damage to her uterus. She would never be able to conceive again. Marco, after hearing it was a boy, expressed a flicker of regret, then abandoned her at the hospital without a second glance. Years later, the drama felt like a lifetime ago. I was sitting in the living room with Arthur, our heads close together as we looked over some documents. I want a kiss, a sweet little voice demanded. I looked down to see our daughter, her little face looking up at us expectantly. Arthur and I both blushed. He scooped our little girl into his arms, and we exchanged a knowing, loving glance. Together, we leaned in and planted 2 soft kisses on her chubby cheeks, our hearts overwhelmed with a quiet, perfect love.